welcome to my podcast, yourABAhelp. I am Sarah, I'm your BCBA. I'm here to help solve all of your ABA problems. And today, we're going to be talking about classical/respondent conditioning and operant conditioning. We're going to talk about all the different terms that seem like the same terms and how we can tell them apart, the difference between them, the difference between respondent and operant, how do you know which one goes where, examples. I got it all for you. And we're also going to hit in on SDs and talk about those a little bit, kind of give us some prep for the next podcast. And then the next podcast, guys, we wrap up Task List B. I am so excited. I'm excited, and then we move right on into Task List C. And in the next podcast, I'm going to be talking a lot about my plans moving forward and how I want to structure the podcast. I want to start moving in a little bit different of a direction. Nothing crazy, so don't panic, but we're just going to be tweaking things a little bit. So if you guys have any feedback for me, make sure you put it in the comments or you reach out, and my email's on there. You guys let me know what you like, what you don't like. I also just want to say thank you so much for watching my YouTube, my podcast, and watching and supporting. I really appreciate it, guys. It means so much to me. And I've got a couple of great YouTube videos getting ready to come out, like the positive sides of ABA, how to be, quote unquote, good BCBA, what things you need to do. They're going to be some good videos. I'm very excited to put them out. I filmed them. I'm working on editing them. I'm trying to get one up, an extra YouTube video up at least once every 2 weeks. This is my goal. Every week would be great, but life's busy. And then also I'm going to be making videos soon of me picking out my first clinic, which is going to be really exciting. So if you're into the more fun content, I'll be taking you guys with me. We'll be checking out some really cool locations, and it's going to be a fun time. So if you're into that kind of content, make sure you go check out my YouTube channel and subscribe if you already aren't. It's going to be a fun journey, guys. All right, first up is respondent conditioning. What is it? The definition is
respondent conditioning, a stimulus-stimulus pairing procedure in which a neutral stimulus is present with an unconditioned stimulus until the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus that elicits the conditioned response. If that made no sense to you, that's okay. We're going to talk about it.
It's important to know that respondent is the exact same thing. So we've got some AKAs here as classical conditioning and Pavlovian conditioning. Those are all the same things. We're talking about Watson, we're talking about the SR conditioning. I do want to say I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here with this podcast. There are a lot of really great videos out there on YouTube that explain how classical conditioning works and goes really in depth with the process and the research behind it. I'm going to talk about what they are, the definitions, how to tell them apart, tips and tricks, how it applies to ABA, what you need to know for the exam, and then I'm going to move on and talk about SD. If you would like more information on the process and how conditioning really works and seeing it broken down visually, I'm going to link some videos in the description box. Feel free to check those out. From my perspective, I think it's just most important to know what each term is to understand what the term means based on the name of the term. So conditioned stimulus. We know what those two words are. What does it mean? How do we pick them out on a question? I think that's really important rather than memorizing the process, how it all works, what has to happen in order for this to happen, and being very detailed and trying to memorize it to examples, because that's where I went wrong. I could apply it to a dog and a bell. I could apply it to this very specific situation, but if I took a step back and I tried to apply it to real life clinical example, I was lost. It was really hard and I didn't understand it. So we're going to kind of break those down and get the terms understandable. We are going to be talking about the comparing and contrasting all these more towards the end, so just buckle and hang in with me. But our first two terms that we're going to be talking about is an unconditioned stimulus and a neutral stimulus. What are those? How do you tell them apart? An unconditioned stimulus is something that elicits, so elicit, Watson, we know that elicits a response from a person without them knowing or being aware. So that, we know unconditioned stimulus is something that we haven't touched yet. It's not paired. It elicits a response. It's unconditioned, unpaired thing. Stimulus is a thing. When I'm trying to apply this, that's how I think of it. An unpaired thing. What's the unpaired thing that is getting a response from a person without them being aware that they're responding or like intending to respond? That's your unconditioned stimulus. Neutral stimulus is going to be the thing that has no effect on a person, it just happens in the environment. It is literally neutral. Period. A neutral thing. In order to understand unconditioned stimulus, you have to also understand that there's an unconditioned stimulus and an unconditioned response. For every unconditioned stimulus, you're going to have that response because it's automatically being elicited without the person knowing. So in order for it to be an unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response has to occur. Let me give you some examples. Unconditioned stimulus tickles, unconditioned response, you giggle and laugh. It's just something you automatically do. You don't have to think about it. This is funny, haha, I'm going to laugh. It's not that. And the same thing for food. If you see a steak like that doggy did, you're going to start salivating if you're into steaks. Unconditioned stimulus, stub your toe. Unconditioned response, you go, ow. Unconditioned stimulus, you see food or you smell food. Unconditioned response, you start salivating or your mouth starts to water. Another one is you get dust in your nose, you sneeze. Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. You got it. Neutral stimulus, some examples of that is going to be a bell, songs, noises in your environment, things that aren't causing any behaviors from that person. Neutral stimulus, it could literally be anything. It could be a light on, a pen tapping. It just depends on the person's environment. It just has to be something that hasn't been paired with anything in the past and is neutral. No meaning, you got it. All right, when we're looking at the process of respondent conditioning, we first have our unconditioned stimulus and we have our neutral stimulus. Those are going to be paired together. In the classic Pavlovian example, we've got the steak and we've got the bell, right? So those are being paired together over time, multiple exposures, multiple days, weeks, depends on the person. You pair those together and then you get a little baby of conditioned stimulus. So that's like the first level, you put those two together and you get your conditioned stimulus, and now you have the process where the dog hears the bell, they automatically start salivating without even seeing the steak because it's been paired together. Conditioned stimulus could literally be anything. Like there's so many things and it's really dependent on the learner. Some classic examples are the school bell ringing at the end of the day. So a bell ringing doesn't have any meaning to you until it's paired with the day ending. That's reinforcing for you. You enjoy it. You get to go home, let's say. And those two things have been paired together. So you hear the bell, you start getting ready to go home. You have your unconditioned stimulus right there. Those are the three main terms. So we've got a few more in there. So we have a conditioned reflex. Conditioned reflex is going to be the exact same thing. Instead of it being paired with a thing, you're pairing it with a reflex. This is going to be where you have paired something and you react out of reflex. You're not thinking about it, but it is paired. An example is when the doctor shines out light in your eye and moving back and forth, or if you're getting your eye exam done and they do that puff of air and you flinch, that's going to be conditioned. Once you are just right there and they have it in their hand, or you sit down at the table and you're getting ready for your exam and you're already wanting to flinch, that's going to be your conditioned reflex. Or when somebody goes to jump at you and you flinch, conditioned reflex. Another little term in there is the conditioned response. So same thing with the unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. You're going to have your conditioned stimulus and your conditioned response. You guys understand this? Conditioned stimulus, bell rings for the end of the day. Conditioned response, you gather your things. Another term that you want to know in all of this is respondent extinction. So we have respondent extinction and operant extinction. Think about what we know about those terms and what we've been learning. So we know that respondent extinction is going to do with SR. We know it's not going to have anything to do with the consequence. So when we're talking about operant extinction, we're putting the consequence, reinforcement on extinction. Whereas with respondent extinction, we are putting that R, that SR on extinction. We're unpairing those. The unconditioned stimulus together, that neutral stimulus together, and we linked them up and they had a baby. We are now divorcing them. We're breaking them apart. It's just a bell and a steak now. Think about this from like the scientific perspective. We're establishing that relationship, and then we're controlling and testing it. We are establishing that this plus this equals that. We have our hypothesis. We have our final product of the person responds to that previously neutral stimulus. So it's very stepwise, and then a responding extinction just kind of goes back and undoes it all. So if you think about like a withdrawal design for our experimental design, if you made it that far in studying, it's just like that. So we're in our intervention, then we go back to our baseline. That's kind of what responding extinction is. We're like starting over and seeing how it works, or we need to unpair those because we've messed up. If that helps you think of it that way, great. One last little sneaky term in there that can kind of confuse you with all this, but it doesn't really have anything to do with respondent conditioning, but it is kind of like that next advanced level that might happen. Cooper talks about higher order conditioning or secondary conditioning. I'm going to give you the definition of it here.
Higher order conditioning or secondary conditioning has occurred when conditioned reflexes can also be established by stimulus-stimulus pairing of a neutral stimulus with a conditioned stimulus. In our previous example, we talked about how our child has paired the morning group time song with the kid screaming, so he has that reflex of tensing up. So in a higher order conditioning, he has paired the teacher walking over to the speaker and automatically tensing up because he has paired the teacher walking over to the speaker playing the music, and the kids screaming from the music.
We could talk all day about how to train a dog using this because, ABA has such a bad rap, and this is one of the ways because the foundation of learning pairing and control and how these variables, interact with each other is the foundation of ABA. And people really pull for this one on why ABA is abuse and it's just dog training. It's this, but we know that this is something that we hardly use in the sense of we aren't going this bare bones using reflex and our respondent behavior in order to teach these kiddos or the population that we serve all their skills that they need or supporting them. It's much, much more than that. That's always my argument to ABA is just dog training. So you might encounter that, which is unfortunate, but I firmly believe every science has its journey. There was a lot of time before the ethics code came along, and that doctor that's giving you that vaccine, if you do some research on it, it's not pretty. We're not proud, but we can do better. Anyway, so clinical example here. A good clinical example that I love to think about when I am working with little kiddos and introducing them to a new environment is songs that we can play in order to kind of promote the behaviors that we're looking for. Every morning, little Johnny comes in and the classroom's nice and quiet. He's chill. He's still tired. He doesn't like loud noise. Too loud of noises makes his ears hurt. He does not like it. He gets really tense and upset. So he really enjoys when it's quiet and chill in the mornings. But by the time it gets around, 8, 9 o'clock, little Johnny's starting to get frustrated and he's starting to notice it's louder. And he knows every day at 8:45 that teacher turns on the speaker and plays the loud good morning song to really hype everybody up. The second she turns on the good morning song, everybody in that classroom goes, ah, and gets so hyped and so excited. That's great. We love that. Little Johnny, though, does not. Little Johnny, as soon as he hears that good morning song, flinches and goes, ah! He does not like it. Okay, so what has happened here is little Johnny has paired that neutral stimulus of the good morning song because good morning doesn't elicit any responses. Good morning is just a neutral song. It's a jam. It's just there. Unconditioned stimulus is hearing those kids scream. Unconditioned response is flinching because it's our reflex, it's our natural instincts to kind of freeze or look and panic when there's a really sudden loud noise, right? So we have our unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response being paired with our neutral stimulus over time, over multiple mornings. Little Johnny has learned that good morning song is going to make him flinch instantly because he knows those kids are going to scream and he does not like it. The kids don't even have to scream anymore. There could be probably no kids in there and Johnny is still ugh. For that little Johnny example, if we were wanting to do respondent extinction, we would start playing that good morning song without the kids screaming. Maybe we put in a program where we have the kids not in the room, or just play the good morning song at different times of the day to unpair it. A very stressful response of little Johnny freezing up, so I'd caution a BCBA in how they do that. I would consider them to be very careful about it and try to do it in a very unstressful way, or just pick a new song. Could be that easy. When you're a BCBA in any environment, these are things that you can think about, is those accidental pairings happen all the time. There's a term for it also when we talk about operant, is faulty stimulus control. Understanding that these relationships have developed. So like when certain things just happen and you're really confused, like I've talked in previous podcasts about when the light turns on and little Johnny hits the floor. There's things that happen that you have to pay attention to and understand there might be a reason outside of everybody's understanding and control, and it might have been something that accidentally happened. Another good classic example that I love, I just want to throw in here real quick because I deal with it all the time. When you go to open a snack baggie and your dogs come running, as a process of respondent conditioning. Like I said, my tip for these is to understand what each term means and how to use those words that the term is, so unconditioned stimulus, to pick out of the story problems and the questions what you need to know. Apply these to your life. Don't just stick to the examples that you see on the internet. Make sure you can really pick them out in real life, because if you can go into a room and understand how the pairings that are happening and the relationships that are occurring and unoccurring through respondent extinction, you got this section. You know the terms. If you can point to them and go down that little ladder of how it's all working, you're solid. I'm going to give you some examples on respondent conditioning and respondent extinction in clinic, or real life examples. Alright, now we're going to switch gears to operant conditioning, so we can kind of do that compare and contrast, so that way you guys can tell the difference between these two and pick them out and understand them. By now, I'm sure you're feeling a little bit more confident in telling them apart. When you're going to pick these out in story problems, that's where it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but if you just think about what we're talking about here and really breaking them down rather than like freezing and panicking, you're going to be golden, I promise. Operant conditioning, you have to think about our ABC data. So if you're looking at a story problem and you're trying to figure out, is it respondent or operant conditioning, you're going to be looking at those elicit versus evokes. Is something just happening outside of the person's control? Is something happening where there's a clear antecedent, a clear behavior, and a clear consequence? My biggest fear is don't try to force that ABC data. If it's not clear and you can't figure it out, it's not there. Like if there's not a clear consequence after that behavior, it's probably not there. It's probably a respondent conditioning or respondent situation. If you pick out an ABC data and they're manipulating that consequence with reinforcement or punishment, that's going to be your operant conditioning. And remember, ABC data, three-term contingency, SRS are all AKAs. Those are all the exact same thing. Respondent conditioning is much more limited in the examples and opportunities because we only have so many reflexes, whereas operant conditioning is literally nearly endless. Like people can have so many behaviors that are paired and learned and all that. There's so many. Operant conditioning is the process of selecting variables and manipulating them in order to prove a functional relationship. That's operant conditioning. When we're talking about like behavior, responses, consequences, that's where this all ties in. Like operant conditioning is the big umbrella of what Skinner's work was. He developed operant behavior, operant conditioning. This was the research behind it. This is how we do it. This is how we change behaviors, is operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is the process of that functional relationship, whereas operant behavior is behavior that's been determined by consequences over time. So you've learned this behavior, it's been taught to you through the ABC, three-term contingency. Another overarching thing to understand about operant conditioning is we don't have to train for every single thing. We don't have to teach everything, and we're going to really get into that when we talk about stimulus relations and stuff. But for now, we're going to talk about generalized reinforcers and generalized punishers. I'm going to hit these super broad because I really think you guys are going to understand these when I tell it to you straight. Generalized reinforcers is going to be something that you have paired with reinforcement and you enjoy it, you find it reinforcing. It's something that anybody could do and you would find it reinforcing. A great classic example is a compliment or praise. For some people, they find that reinforcing. It doesn't have to be trained with each individual person. The reinforcement doesn't have to be the same every time. So some people love compliments on their outfits. It doesn't matter who gives you that compliment. You're going to feel good. It's going to be reinforcing most of the time. It doesn't have to be the exact same compliment every single time. It could be a variation in how they say it. It's a generalized reinforcer. Another good one is money. So we can have like classroom bucks. We could have like a point system at work. We could have actual cash money. We could have tokens at an arcade. All generalized reinforcers. I know when I was studying, all of these different terms got really confusing real fast because you've got like operant behavior, operant extinction, you've got operant conditioning, you've got discriminant operant, stimulus discriminant. It just stimulus control is in there too. Like there's so many words that sound so similar, and that's what makes ABA so hard is they all sound like they overlap. We're gonna keep working through these so that way we can talk through them. Next, we're going to talk about a discriminative operant. What is that? A discriminative operant is a behavior that occurs more due to the antecedent conditions. And by more, I mean more than the other behaviors. This is where we're starting to move into the territory of an SD. But we're not there yet. This is just the behavior that occurs more. It's not the thing that occurs before it to signal it. It's the behavior. Operant. Operant means behavior, guys. Keep that in mind. When we start talking about stimulus control and tying that into this is where stimulus control can come in. So we have the antecedent that is present, and evoking that behavior is going to also be that discriminant operant, that behavior that comes out. And I'm going to give you some examples of stimulus control. My favorite example ever is when you go trick-or-treating and you see a light on for the house. The houses that have the light on have the stimulus control of you going and ringing that bell. Houses are always there. Houses with porch lights are always there. You see them every day. But on Halloween, you have the stimulus control over those porch lights being on or off in order to get candy. You've learned through your consequences over time that some houses will give you candy and some with the lights on. Or, maybe it's the nice old lady standing in the front porch. Things like that are going to have stimulus control over your behavior of walking up to that house, getting candy. Another great example is your phone is always sitting on the table or it's always in your hand, but you're not answering all the time. What's got stimulus control over your answering behavior is that phone ringing. And then we can move into an SD. SD is a discriminative stimulus. Think about those words. So discriminative is discrimination stimulus. So this stimulus is signaling that reinforcement is available. It's signaling that if you do this behavior, you have a chance for reinforcement. And that's where we've got our discriminative stimulus, so our SD, signaling that the porch lights is on, that you could get candy here. The stimulus control over your behavior of going up has happened because the porch light is on versus off. And then your discriminative operant, your behavior is going up to the house to get candy, and then you can put that in your ABC data. Do they get candy? Yes or no? That's where you'd reinforce it or punish it, right? And then we're going to tie in operant extinction real quick. So operant extinction would be where the house with the light on doesn't give you candy. Over repeated exposures, you're going to realize I don't get candy. So on November 1st, try to do Halloween again. They're going to learn through extinction that that's not going to work. They're not going to get reinforced. And we know it's operant extinction because this doesn't have anything to do with reflexes or the antecedent only. We know through the consequences of them whether they get the candy or not on if the behavior has changed. And the last thing I want to include in this before we do our task list tie-in here is multiple things can be true. So I know a lot of you guys want one term to apply to one answer, and this is where the best answers, questions, or the most true questions really get tricky because multiple things can be true. So multiple definitions can apply to one thing, especially when we're talking about ABC data. We can have a lot of different terms can apply to that antecedent. It could be this, it could be that, and it also could be that. An example is, you raising your hand could be an intervention strategy. It could be a DRA, it's the alternative behavior. It could be an antecedent intervention. It could be an SD. It could be an intention seeking. It could be operant behavior. It could be that antecedent. It could be the behavior. It all depends on these situations, and that's why being able to understand these mock questions and your exam questions is so important, and your application feels so important, because you have to be able to take the information that's available to you and ask the right questions and answer the question that's being asked. What do we want to know about that hand raising behavior? Because it could be 5 different things. Like, we could dissect that hand raising behavior and get a whole bunch of different answers. Like, I could talk all day about it, talk about the topography, functions. Anything could apply to that hand raising behavior. So it's never just one answer. It's never just an SD and that's it. And that's where you've got to learn these keywords and these terms and understand the categories that these things fall in. That's why I'm emphasizing so hard on what's a respondent and what's an operant, because that will help you really trickle down and determine these answers if you're able to get them into the correct categories. Last thing we've got is our task list tie-in. So what did I cover in this task list? So you can keep checking off. And like I said in the beginning, our next podcast is going to be just kind of that wrap up of those few little terms that we have left. And we're going to talk about the future and all of that jazz. For the task list tie-in for this one, I did B3, define and provide examples of respondent and operant conditioning. B5, you can mark off, I feel solid with that one. Define and provide examples of schedules of reinforcement. We talked a lot about that one last time and talked a little bit more about it when we're talking about operant conditioning. I wanted to wait to check that one off because I wanted to make sure that we really understand how those fall and where those apply. You can also check off B8, that is define and provide examples of unconditioned, conditioned, and generalized reinforcers and punishers. Alright guys, I think that is everything. I sit here and I wonder, I'm like, did I hit on half of the things? I think I did. And when I go back and edit, I'm just like, voiceover here, let's squeeze a voiceover in there, let's put a graphic here to give you more information. We're learning. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed this process so far, and I am so excited to wrap up Task List B next podcast. I have it all right now. I'm going to film it soon and edit it so it's ready for you guys to go up next Sunday. Big overview recap. If you've made it this far, I do want you to tell me, do you watch or listen to the audio mocks? If you do you enjoy them? Is there some better way you could do it? I'm thinking more of like a fluency. So just asking, what's this? There it is. What's that? There it is. Like a flashcard style. So you could do flashcards like while you're driving, essentially. Let me know what you think. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. I hope your studying is going amazing. I hope you're thinking about when you're going to sit for that exam and imagine yourself as a BCBA, manifesting it, or BCABA, manifest that too. It's all valid and it's all amazing, and we appreciate all of you. Bye guys.